Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome into What's in Disguise. I have a fascinating guest with me. Anyway, most of you know who I am. I am Michael Anthony. I work out of Studio 10 Broadcasting, 10 o'clock talks in Pittsburgh, PA, which, by the way, we're neighbors. You were mid central Ohio, Karen, and I would say I'm on the lower part of the panhandle of Pennsylvania, but very close. And
Oh yeah.
uh, just we're neighbors in a certain way, but
Yeah.
it's funny how we bump into each other and how we could meet each other and talk and have these creative scenarios of people like you who articulate and decided to do that and write it into a book called The Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. Just a mind-blowing but very, very deep title for a book. And I know you have a lot of reasons behind that. Also, in some of your work, you've been lecturing, you've been traveling, you've been working with LA, the big gun of theology, who, as I call him, an icon. Said, remarkable
Thank
to be able to do that and to share experiences with him as you are. So I think the best way to go about this is, I've learned a lot about you, and I have nothing but respect for you and your story and your message that you're putting out there and the support you're giving, opening the door that you have with many others as well, because we are sharing a commonality in everything in life. I like to use that C word. I don't know why, but it's like it's everywhere. So at a very young age, let's start there. I wanted to just reach out and hug you when I heard you share that you lived in such a fear that you would have to go under your mom and dad's bed with the
you,
dog
God.
hairs
God.
and dust bunnies and just try to sleep and feel protect. I just wanted to reach out and hug that little girl when I heard you make that comment.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I wanted to stress that to you because I don't know what that would be like to live through, although I've lived through some things and seen some things, remarkable things that I could say I would, here I am as an experiencer. I did this, I seen that, but you live something much different than what many of us will ever understand. So, how would you like to start with that part of it?
Great. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Michael, thank you for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you and all of your Facebook Live audience today. And yeah, it's been such an honor to be able to work with the great Eli Marzulli. He is really the OG in this field, and you and I just had a wonderful talk before I came on here. And one of the things that always impresses me is that Eli Marzulli he's so focused on his goal and his love for God and in what he's trying to do and accomplish and achieve. So I just want to say, a big thank you to him, because I wouldn't be able to do this without him, and with people like you as well. So thank you. Yeah, to start from the beginning is probably the best place to start.
Yeah,
And how all of that happened. I wrote the book because I really wanted to share the story, and from a more biblical lens, not saying preachy or religious or anything like that, but from a view of what do the ancient texts, the ancient scriptures, the ancient scrolls, the extra canonical books, all the other things that are out there say about these entities and who and what they are, um, in addition to writing about what has happened to me. Because for me to be able to get through this and past it, the knowledge of who and what they are was where that began, and knowing that God was there to save me from them and to bring me out of this nightmare. And so I think it's all very important when we're having the discussions about aliens and UFOs and UAPs and everything else that's out there right now. Um, so yeah, I can start with when I was little. Like you said, it was just a terrifying way to grow up, because I before I even remembered being taken, I was afraid of people who looked like the Nordic entities I had been encountering. People with blonde hair and big blue eyes and tall and thin, I would be terrified of. And that was half of my family looked like that. So my
hmm,
parents could not understand why I wouldn't go to them. But, and you can't, at a 2 or 3 year old, can't vocalize that. When I was 5 or 6, I having the really more concrete memories of when they would come to take me. And it would be at nighttime usually, and it didn't matter where I was. I could be at a friend's house, a neighbor's house, grandparents' house, at home. What was supposed to be the safety of my room, my bedroom, my bed was not a safe place. There wasn't a safe place for me. I remember talking to an older sibling um, about where I, wanted to hide that night. And she's like, it doesn't matter where you go, they can see us through the house. And we're just little kids. I had to be like 5 or 6 years old having this conversation about them who can see us through the house. We didn't have the vocabulary for who and what they were. There weren't movies and books and podcasts and streaming services to share that with us. And even if there were, at that little, we probably wouldn't have had access to it. So it was very hard to even know what we were dealing with. I was just scared. And they would show up in the middle of the night, and I would feel that presence in the room. I would feel an evil presence. I would be terrified. Sometimes I'd wet the bed. I'd close my eyes, put the covers over my head, and when I wasn't closing my eyes, there would be sometimes light coming in one of the windows. Sometimes it would get really silent, like if we were in the countryside, the crickets or cicadas or outside noises would just be quiet. And we would see, I would see 2, maybe 3, sometimes at least 2, sometimes more, of the typical gray aliens in my room. They had the big bulbous heads. They had the big black eyes that didn't move. They looked like a screen. They didn't have anything real about them that looked real. They were very thin. They had tiny little thin necks for these giant heads. They had mouths that didn't open, like slits for their mouth and their nose and their ears would be. And their bodies would just seem so frail and like you could break them. And some of them didn't smell very good. And I just tried to describe them in detail because I think it's important, because these entities are different than any other entities that I saw during my encounters when I was being taken. And sorry, my phone is going nuts and I have it on silent.
no,
I don't
that's
know why it's
okay.
not going silent. It keeps interrupting my train of thought. I'm trying to make it go silent. So we, when they would show up, they would put me into what I call a state of waking paralysis.
Mhm.
And so I'm wide awake and I can see and I can hear, but all of a sudden, even if I did try to yell out before they put me into this waking paralysis state, if there was anyone else in the room with me, like a sibling or a partner or a parents or anyone, no one could hear me. Like they were all in a deep, deep sleep state. Or maybe I thought I was yelling, but I wasn't. You know what I mean? It's just no one ever heard me. And then to be put in that state of paralysis is terrifying because you can't move. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. At that point,
You did have thought.
oh, definitely. Yeah. Yes. Oh, definitely. I was cognizant. I was awake. I had thought.
Right.
I had sleep paralysis, which is a very different, for me, sleep paralysis is very different because you're kind of coming out of sleep into it. But from waking paralysis is my definition is I was already awake. I was already moving around. And then suddenly I've been restricted in my movement.
Right.
And now I can't move anymore. So I'm still wide awake. So I wasn't even in a sleepy state. You know what I mean? At that point, whatever is there woke me up. Now I'm awake. Now I can't move. I can't defend myself. I can't do anything. And that's the point where they would levitate me off of the bed and either through a closed window, up through the ceiling, down a hall, whatever that particular time, whichever way they were taking me out of the house, and they would take me out of my home. And to go through a window or a ceiling, I know sounds just crazy, but there would just be this low vibrational hum, and it would feel like my body was going to a million bazillion little pieces almost. It's just so hard to describe. And I would see everything, like the ceilings in the different houses and all the little details, what kind of ceiling it was. Was it wallpaper? Was it like that popcorn stuff? Was it just smooth? Or where the little attic hatch was, or the screen, all the little details, just the weird things that I remember seeing so up close. And seeing the things in the room, pictures and chairs and things getting further and further away.
Okay.
At that point, I would usually be just kind of put into a sleep state. Like they would knock me out. They have this ability to control feelings, thoughts, emotions, physical and emotional reactions. And they can manipulate and understand physics in ways that we don't yet. So it's not that it's impossible for someone to go through a wall or a ceiling. It's that we don't understand how that works because we're not
Right.
there yet. And they manipulate space, time, energy, and matter in ways that, we're just so far beyond us. Their intelligence and understanding is so advanced. And it doesn't always fit into our little paradigm of how we live and where our world is. And if we don't expand that paradigm to allow some other things in, none of this will ever, be able to make sense to anyone. But for those
Right.
of us who've gone through it,
Right. There is a big divide there of understanding how it is and accepting the understanding how it could be. Because as you said, you felt like a lower vibration. I've
oh,
heard that said before. Um, Maybe not the same way, but I've heard that said before. And during the abduction, when it was happening, as I had, been fortunate enough to interview and speak to some people privately of their feelings, it was kind of like that. Okay, Scotty, beam us up. That particle breakdown that
yeah,
happens, but they said that some people described to me that they felt a uniqueness, whether they were going through a brick wall, a window, or a ceiling, that there was a certain type of physical feeling of
oh, definitely.
element of feeling,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
how they described it. Did you experience some indifferences as how they took you through different portals or different realms of how this intelligence works?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. I definitely felt a unique feeling in that it's not something we have, not something that we experience in our day-to-day lives here. But also depending on what type of surface I was going through, I also felt different.
Okay.
So it's kind of but yeah, it's so hard to describe because I don't have the words to describe it because it's not something we have. It's like describing a new color, you know,
Mm.
that's the best way I can put it. It just doesn't, there's no way I can
Fit it.
fit it into, to
Yeah.
make it make sense. Um,
Gotcha.
so
Gotcha.
it's so hard to describe, but yeah, it's a very unique, different feeling where it's not that I felt special or anything like that. It's just there's this to your core kind of feeling where you feel this change, this just molecular change almost.
Hmm.
Um, Somewhere between dizziness and vibration, and it just it's so overwhelming, like a wave just washing over, and there's just so much going on in that moment.
Mm.
So it's a very overwhelming feeling when it is happening, and it's overwhelming as well because it's not something we experience. So it's like that kind of feeling where you feel like you're going to fall, and you
Yeah.
suddenly get that, ugh, every time. Um, I wouldn't say that it was fun by any means, because it was just scary, especially not knowing what was happening.
Right.
Um, and so once they would take me to wherever they were taking me, it was different all the time. Sometimes I would just wake up on an exam table with these big faces looking down at me. With
Oh,
these
wow.
the grays that I encountered outside of being the actual abduction process were different. The ones that were there that were doing examinations or that were, doing other things did not look like the little grays that would come to pick me up. The grays that would be doing the tests or whatever they were doing on me, the ones that I most often saw, from this kind of angle, they were all different heights, different shapes and sizes. Their faces all looked different. Their eyes, while still black, it creeps me out to think about it, but because I don't like the memory of it, but their eyes moved, whereas the little grays picking up, it just was like a screen. It could be like a sticker on something, almost the way their eyes were. Their eyes were just stationary. But the other grays, they were all very individual. and their eyes moved. And it was almost like it could have been a black iris with a black pupil and a black surrounding it. You know what I mean? Because there was just
Right.
movement there. You could see it. But don't know what it was made up of or how their eyes worked or anything.
Yeah, that's a we can speculate around it as being some
Right.
type of AI, a
Well, there's yeah.
transhumanism of some sort. I mean, who's to say? And did you ever pinch yourself while you were going through this?
I didn't need to because they were hurting me and I could
Oh,
feel the physical pain. So,
okay.
it didn't, and it was happening so often. And I knew I was there. I knew I was awake. I knew who they were and what they were doing. And, not exactly what they were doing, but I knew that, I was back in this place. I was back with these entities who were terribly frightening. They didn't tell me what they were doing to me. They just were doing things and telling me, you're okay, you're special, it's fine, be calm. It was always mind speak. The little grays, the ones who had come to pick me up, I really believe they were some kind of a meat suit, like an avatar, created to hold AI or a demon or another entity of some sort. And it makes sense to me because because we know we have crashed craft, because we know we have biologics. If that is what's in the craft, piloting these craft, if that is what's coming to take people, if one of those craft does crash, the only thing that the people who gather that craft, whoever it may be, because we don't know what these branches of government or societies are that are taking them, they're just going to get an empty meat suit at that point. It's not going to be anything that they can derive any intelligence from. It's not going to give away the farm. It's just going to be an empty skin suit. And having seen those things empty and other people having, I think Whitley Strieber or someone said he described it in his book of seeing them, hanging, and other people talked about seeing them in drawers, and I've seen them just stacked in a corner. They're empty and they all look the same. Whereas all the other entities that I encountered during the times that I was taken were all unique and different.
Okay.
The grays had the regular grays, not these little avatar meat suits, but the regular grays, some were taller, some were shorter, some were, they had faces and facial expressions and that moved, that were more animated. There were reptilians that some looked more gray than reptilian, some looked more reptilian than gray. I don't know if there were crossovers in there. I have no idea. There were the insectolan types who, to this day, looking at things like the hammerhead sharks or certain kinds of shrimp where their eyes move independently freaks me out. I can't stand it because it looks so much like them.
Really?
I always said the insectolans look more like sea creatures than insects, but I use that term because that's what everyone uses. If it was me, I'd call them sea creature types because they look more like things I've seen under the water. But all of these entities, they all seem to have unique features, unique personalities, unique everything, like we do, just the same as people do. They're not people, but I'm just saying that they had uniquenesses about them.
Right.
And then, so I that's what leads me to believe these little grays that seem to be, void of abilities to, they're, if it is a demon put into an avatar type body suit, that's going to restrict its movement, right? It doesn't have a mouth that opens, so it can't scream at you and yell curse words at you and bite you or anything like that. They didn't have any discernible external organs, so they can't rape someone or hurt someone in that way. So it makes sense to me that they would be some sort of an avatar utilized just to kind of do the grunt work, like the worker bees. Almost.
Right. And I guess if it came down to it, when we look at what we think we know, what we're learning, what we're hearing, is that this download, if there is something of a sort of when we leave our body and went on that final day in time, our mind, spirit and mind, as they say now, can be downloaded into ANI. And it makes you wonder, when what you're dealing with or what we think we're dealing with, and the time that has passed, and for how long that this has been going on, being depicted in religious pictures and paintings, and whether there's paintings from the Ice Age, many examples of these things showing up and being a part of this civilization of humanity. it's just mind-blowing when you take that, because as you said, they could be demons, and maybe they have this separate ability to understand how maybe even us being reincarnated with the same spirit and mind, but into a different body at a different time. And that's also maybe occurring with them. And that's part of what you experienced, was that example of them giving an ability of something that could be that nefarious is very possible.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory. I mean, I don't subscribe to the reincarnation theory myself, having had a near-death experience and understanding that my spirit is me. When God took it out of my body and allowed me to see what was going on and put it back in there, understanding that this is the body you get while you're here, and then you go on from there. So, and also understanding, having seen that there are realms that exist where we can't see them, but they can quite possibly see us. The Bible tells us the angels watch us as if it's like I can't remember the word uses, like they're spectators of us. And so if you think of it that way, to look at, an intelligent order created by God, which are these angelic beings to serve God and to help people.
Right.
And there are fallen ones, then you've got all these entities that are basically observing, watching through time. Time doesn't exist in these dimensions the way it does here. They're not bound by the laws of gravity and the laws of time and the things that affect us and our bodies the way we have to be in these constraints. So they've got the ability to see probably backwards and forwards within time that we just don't conceive of that. And when you're talking about, for me, a demon, the definition of a demon is the disembodied spirit of a Nephilim. Mm-hmm. And for your listeners, if you don't know what a Nephilim is the progeny of a fallen angelic being and a human being, which goes back to, through ancient texts and in all different, so many different areas. But going into the biblical text, it's in Genesis 6, where it says the sons of God saw the daughters of men were beautiful and married of them wives of all that they chose. And they bore to them the Nephilim. These were the mighty men of old, the Gibborim. So you look at if you look at Greek mythology and all those things, and these, the giants and all these things, and we have, the giant bones that people find and all of that, it makes all of that make sense. And when they were killed, the extra canonical books tell us that God said, you're neither heavenly nor earthly, right? They were a mix of the two. Right. And so they were just doomed to roam. Well, they need a body, because otherwise they're stuck in that dimension that's watching everything, but doesn't get to really interact. So they need a body. So that little gray suit is a perfect way to get them in a body and get them to do some work. And, they get to interact. I mean, when Jesus cast the demons out, the legion, they said, send us into the pigs. They wanted a body. They didn't care if it was human or animal. So these things are looking for a body to get back into. That's why some people say, oh, you're possessed. That's what it is. When you start messing with these things, they attach to you because they want to be attached to you or someone and it's dangerous game to play when you start messing around with those things, which I'm sure you know.
Yeah, and a lot of people do it willingly. It's remarkable. I don't think that people think enough about what they're doing or the harm that could come to them from what they're doing. Maybe it's something that we should stay away from in the paranormal and look at it from a different perspective somehow. But people want to, be the next new thing and be the next new person with the next new evidence or some type of something that, puts a more creative spin, but a factive spin on what the truth is in this reality, trying to understand this reality. And I don't know if people ever walk away from that. And as you said, you have like a sector of one into ours, one dimension into our dimension. That would be also another name for that, I think, in case people, if I'm wrong, please correct me, because I do make errors. They would be the ones that they call the demigods.
Yeah, so the Nephilim would be like the demigods, exactly. And then someone in your chat said, would that people refer to the Watchers? The Watchers would be, the angelic beings. We use the word angel. Angel really means messenger, but it's kind of a coverall. It doesn't really fit because we don't have a good,
Gotcha.
but sons of God is a good way to identify, what we call angels, because they're different. They have different jobs. Some of them are watchers. And yeah, the watchers are that the ones that fell were watchers that decided to take wives. So yeah, the demigods would be like the Nephilim, the giants, the mighty men of old, the Gibberim. There's so many different names for them and
Right.
different types that were all over. And that's what led to the flood of Noah, where they had taken over the world and just corrupted everything. And that's when it had to be cleansed of all of the, just that, because it wasn't human. There was no, basically no humanity left. So, but not to go down that, that kind of, we're going down a different road and I don't want to get too far off course, but that is what I think inhabits those little grays based on, being around them as much as I
Right.
will. And then talking to other experiencers who've been around them who felt the same way. And just kind of cap that off. It's very dangerous to try to call on these things or to go out looking for them, to want them to come around you. They have been around a lot longer than we are. They are stronger. They're smarter. They have abilities outside of ours. They can come in and out of our realm. We can't do those things. And
Right.
so you don't know if you're going to get a good one or a bad one, because it's just like it is here. The bad guys don't come up to you and say, hey, I'm, with a t-shirt on, it says, hey, I'm a carjacker, or hey, I'm I'm going to swindle you out of all your money, or, hey,
Right.
I'm a pedophile. You don't get to know that. They come in and they sweet talk you and they lure you in, to luring kids into a van with candy, so you have to be careful. The bad guys aren't going to tell you they're the bad guys. They're going to tell you they're the good guys. And then you're going to bring that nastiness home and it's going to attach to you. And you might think, oh, I'm going to get this great ability. Nothing comes without a price. It all comes with a price. And then you bring that home to your friends and your family, your children. It's a very dangerous place. That's why I was mentioning to you before we started, before this aired, my friend Vicki Joy Anderson and her book, They Only Come Out at Night. Great resource for anyone wanting to know more about that, because I'm not the expert, she is. And she and I will be doing some interviews together. Maybe we can do one with you sometime, because she really is the expert on that. And it's fascinating and it's important. We are required to know these things. And, the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge, because
Yeah.
we just don't know, but it's not an excuse.
Right. You got to weigh all subject matter when it comes to this, because the deep dive is so deep and so almost so unbelievable. You have to grasp at every straw of research that you can come up with to try to analyze it. And everybody's going to have a different perception of it too. That's where they get us. And that divide, no matter how you look at it, no matter what the subject matter is, there always seems to be that typical outlook again where the commonality comes into the focus of picture. And not everybody will see it in the same light that you and I may, because we're looking at something different. Some people say, well, we're more awake. It's higher consciousness. We're going to evolve. I don't know what evolving is, except for the simple fact is our future will be laid out by others of wherever these others are from, controlling whatever. So it happens. And I'm not taking the big P political standpoint of this in this scenario. I'm trying to just share with you, I guess, my idea of the future is going to be the future. It's just for us to accept it. It may not be overwhelmingly great, and that'll be part of how what the initiative on how we will react to things in the future, because it's going to be so much different for everybody as we evolve to that. When you were taken, I know you talk about stolen seed, and I want to go down that path for just a minute, if you don't mind. And it's probably hard for you to maybe talk about, and you call it the evil harvest. So I think what you were explaining in the title was you went through something. If you care to elaborate on it, that would be fine. If you don't, I accept that too. But it seems to me that you were a product of testing, like almost like a vaccination. We can cure smallpox with this, but is this all part, do you think, from what you experienced and what you saw, a transformation of humanism as we know it?
Yeah, no, I really don't think so. What I think was happening was that, they were taking me, kidnapping me against my will as a young child, and eventually that turned into rape against my will as an older,
Ah,
as a young adult. And the result of that were pregnancies that I would get pregnant, be excited, go to a doctor, everything would be confirmed, and then in the first trimester at some point, I would start to spot, I wouldn't feel good, go to the hospital, no heartbeat, no ultrasound, no baby. They would do a DNC and there would be no fetal tissue. These are pregnancies that I was, with someone at the time, so it wasn't unusual for me to get pregnant. B, confirmed by a doctor, in some cases seeing or listening to that heartbeat. And, you know, having blood tests, having all the testing done, confirmed pregnancies, you feel it as a woman, you feel it in your body. I get a lot of pushback on this. Well, you must not have been pregnant. Well, no, a woman knows when she's pregnant. You know that feeling in your body changes and the things that happen. And people don't have to believe me, but I will tell you what, the number of women I have talked to that have gone through this very same thing, it is heartbreaking. And it's heartbreaking for us because we're like, one minute we're excited and joyful and a new life is coming into our world. And then the next minute it's gone. And we
right.
have no baby to mourn. We have no baby to bury and mourn and to memorialize. And doctors are telling us, oh, well, you lost it, but you just didn't realize it, or your body absorbed it, or you weren't really pregnant, or, well, we don't know. Or maybe it's a tubal pregnancy. And they go up and look at my fallopian tubes and, oh, there's nothing there. And it's very invasive and it's very emotional and it's very difficult. But this happened to me time and again. And I knew what they were doing, but I can't tell that to my doctors. There's such a stigma behind this. You can't talk to anyone. And I was warned not to talk to anyone or, my family would be hurt or killed. And that is something that happened very early in life that I detail more in the book and in other interviews. But so at one point I was taken and I was taken to an area. And when I was taken, it was definitely some sort of underground facility. And these places are huge. I mean, as big as you can imagine. Talk about, airports and sports stadiums, complexes and high schools and just big buildings you can think of all put together, and it's bigger. And some rooms are massive. Like, just I couldn't even tell you how big. They're so huge. And some rooms are tiny, and there's hallways and stairways and elevators and it's huge. It's a complex, massive complex. And there are all different, there are people, there are humans, and there are abductees. There are humans working alongside non-human alien entities, all doing this, all in these facilities that appear to be underground. Um, and I was taken once and down a hallway that I didn't recognize, and everything there is also very darkly lit and indirectly lit. Like, I never saw lights hanging or like can lights or anything in the ceilings. I could never figure out where the light was coming from. But this particular hallway was a very reddish kind of light in it. And the hallway was lined with what looked like tanks, like aquariums in a fish store, in a pet store, if you've
Hmm.
ever seen that. And in these tanks, I was trying so hard to concentrate because in these tanks were something that looked like fetuses. And when I was taken, my friend Nellie Marzulli coins the term UFO brain fog. And it's a very accurate description of what happens when I was taken. And I've confirmed this with many other former abductees as well. It feels like you're walking through molasses and like your thoughts are even in molasses. You know what I mean? It's just,
Hmm.
it's so hard nothing is working quite right. You can't walk fast enough. You can't move the way you want to. You can't think as clearly as you want to. And so I remember concentrating really hard to see what was in these tanks. And I couldn't make out, they weren't quite human. Were they animal? Were they human? Were they chimeric? I don't know. Clearly, they must have been some sort of hybrid entities. Hybrids of what? I have no idea.
Right.
That would be speculation on my part. But so they took me to the end of the hall where those aquarium things stopped, those tanks. And there was a doorway on either side. And then the hallway just went to a normal hallway. And they opened the doorway to the right of me. And it was like a size of a large closet. And there was a woman in there on the floor imitating childbirth. I'm like, just, what is she doing? She has this little baby with her that she's pretending to give birth to. And the entities that are with me, and at the time I think it was a gray and like a Nordic type entity, hand me a little baby. Excuse me. And they say, "This is your baby. This is a good baby. Hold your baby." So I take this baby, and it doesn't look right. Its head is really big. Its eyes are really big. It's very reddish purple in color, and it's very solid, compact. Like it was like holding a brick. It was little, and I hold it up to me, to my skin, and it won't cuddle into me. It just didn't respond to me, and I'm trying to get this baby to respond to me. I'm looking at this baby, and I'm holding it up to me, and I'm looking at then I'm going, "What's wrong with my baby? What's wrong with my baby?" And I knew this just instinctively. I knew this was my baby. I could see features that looked like me. I could tell it was mine, but it wasn't crying. It wasn't making any noise. It wasn't cuddling into me. It wasn't really responding to me. And I just kept trying to hold it and cuddle it. And they're like, "It's, hold your baby. It's a good baby." And blah, they're going on. And I'm like, and I'm getting really upset. I'm like, "What's wrong with my baby?" And they're like, "Okay, you have to go now." And I'm like, "No, I'm taking my baby home. I'm going to take care of my baby. I'm going to fix my baby." Because I could tell something had to be wrong, right? I mean, I didn't know what it was. I didn't understand what a hybrid was. I didn't understand what they were doing to me. All I knew is that I wanted that baby and I was going to take it home.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just got really upset. The next thing I know, I wake up back in my bed. And, I don't have that baby. And it was devastating. It was devastating. But at that point, I knew what they were doing and what they were doing to me.
Right.
So I stopped going to the doctor when I would get pregnant. I would wait. I would literally, at that point, the home pregnancy tests were starting to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would go buy like 10 of those things and just keep doing them like every 2 or 3 days and wait till I get to a certain point. And then I would go to the doctor just because I just couldn't let myself get emotionally attached anymore. And, but I knew they were out there and I wanted them. And I didn't quite understand. I understand now that they're hybrids, that they are modern day Nephilim, that I was part of a breeding program, like so many other women. If I told you the number of women that I talk to or that I email with or that I meet or message with, you would be astounded, who have gone through the same thing that I have, who've heard this story and reached out and said, "I am not alone anymore. Thank you for sharing your story. I don't have to feel alone anymore. I'm not crazy. This same thing happened to me." For me, that's worth it. I will cry every day and share the story every day if it means someone else out there doesn't have to feel alone and that they
Right.
know that it's okay, that you can get through it. It's hard, but we'll get through it because, there is light. And God does heal our hearts. So,
Yeah.
but I still wanted those babies. And I still prayed about it, and I kept saying, "God, I want those children. I want whoever's out there. I want them. I want them. They're mine." I didn't understand that a Nephilim, because it's not fully human, won't have the characteristics of a human. I can't say if they're redeemable or not. That's not for me to say. That's only for God to say. But one night I woke up. It was just a couple of years ago, and in the middle of the night, and there were 3 boys standing beside my bed, and immediately I said one of my boys' names out loud, thinking it was my kids standing there. And as I'm waking up and focusing and looking at them, I realized, oh, wait, these aren't, so, and so. These aren't my boys. They're too short. They're too stocky. They're wearing clothes that my boys don't have, So I hit my husband real hard. I'm like, "Hey, wake up." I say his name. I'm trying to wake him up and he won't wake up. He's just in this deep, deep sleep. I cannot rouse him. I'm trying to get him up. So I look back over to these 3 boys. They're all wearing what looks like gray hoodies that just kind of cover over around their face a bit. Their eyes looked very black. I couldn't tell if their eyes were black for sure because the room was very dark and these hoodies just made it really hard to see. But I could see enough of their faces to see resemblance. I knew they were my kids. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm thinking, you're here. I was excited. But then I just felt this evil come off of them. I mean, just this hate. And I'm like, what's wrong? And they're doing mind speak to me. They're not speaking with their normal. They're just doing mind speak. And they're like, you have to come with us. I'm like, no, I can't come with you. You can stay here with me. I'm thinking I can still fix these guys, right? I'm still in that mindset of a mom. A mom is always wanting to help make it better. No, you have to come with us. I'm like, no, I won't go back there. I won't go back to that. At that point, I'd already stopped the abductions. And God had, for me. And so they kept just saying, no, you have to come with us. And you could just feel the seething anger just building with them. And they started to try to levitate me off the bed. It's that old familiar feeling again. And I'm just like, no, in Jesus' name, no, I'm not going to do it. And I said that just so matter of factly, because it's just something, I talk to Jesus all the time, talk to God all the time, prayer life is just normal part of life. Second I said that, they're gone. And at the same moment, they're gone. Boom, my husband sits straight up in bed and he's like, what? And I'm just like, oh, why couldn't you woken up 5 seconds earlier, but they had that hold on him where he couldn't have. And they were gone. And it was terrifying. A terrifying experience, but you know what? I felt like I got closure. I really did. And that was something for me that I'm grateful that I had. And then it lets me know, don't go looking for those. If anyone else out there thinks they have a hybrid child out there, it wasn't a positive experience. It was a scary experience. And I had never had any encounters since.
Interesting. So the mentioning of Jesus stopped everything in its tracks right there.
Right there in that very second.
That's amazing. And there's a lot to be said about that, where in different types of paranormal situations, it's like that realm knows of something beyond what we understand of the existence of this person, Jesus, and who he was, or Yahshua, depending upon, if knowing the J didn't come until after and got put in place and, things of that. But, I could hear in your voice, you breaking up somewhat. And I understand it's hard for you. And I don't like to rehash anything, so I apologize for that. But I appreciate you sharing, because that's probably the most important part of what we'll do today, is letting other women know, because I've always been an activist for women, protecting them, getting them the same wages as a man, all the scenarios of what one could do in that way. But what you endured and what you had to live with and what you discovered, below level 7, it's something that I'm working on. Abduction 911, and we know about David Politis and the 411, and all the missing. And as you said, when you get deep under into some of these areas, the deep military industrial, whatever you want to call it, complex that it really is, whether it's all about genetics or changing DNAs and or modifying different DNAs to compat with others. I mean, we know that publicly speaking, that they talked about recreating a sheep and different types of. So yes, these things are very likely and very possible. Cloning is possible. And you probably walked into what I call nightmare heaven. It's a nickname that the military used to use, because there were certain places when you traveled underground, and I have pictures of them actually. When you go in there, the lighting changes. You can't tell where it's coming from. Everything you described.
Really?
And you can even take sidecar, like Amtrak cars.
That's what I traveled in. Yeah, I felt like I was in little car. I felt like it was I called them the sideways elevators because when I was little, I didn't understand quiet vehicles. Because remember, I'm a little bit older, so vehicles were always very loud growing up. And
Yeah.
we would go in these elevators, and then I'd go in what I called the sideways elevators because they went side to side or up and down or crazy turns and stuff. And I was always scared because I didn't understand how an elevator could go in those directions. I mean, I was scared anyway, but that was always one that, I was just like, but it had seats in it, like these little bench seats. And, that's how they would get us from point A to point B. And I didn't understand about quiet vehicles, but it was very silent, like an elevator.
Yeah. Well, I think Emery Smith even talked a little bit about them. You probably know who he is. He made claim publicly that when he was working as a scientist, receiving tissue samples for these biologics or whatever you want to, nickname them as, he remembered being transported in these same types of systems that you
Oh, wow.
described to get him from different points of point A to point B. And you don't even realize the magnitude of the speed that they're capable of, because I think he was kind of even befuddled about, oh my God, when he found out at a later point where they were taking him in such a short manner of time. He wasn't even working in the same state that he thought he was in. And that's how fast these levitation systems that they have under their work. Phil Schneider talked about a lot of the same type of aspects of things that were kind of found when he broke his story out, and we know where that got him. We can only hope that everybody remains safe that talks publicly about the scenarios of things like this. What's in disguise is part of why I do it. It's because I know what I saw and I haven't experienced what everybody else did. But I do know, like, even through my experience, and I talk about this almost every show I do, What's in Disguise, is when I called for people to observe what I was observing, nobody heard me. So it concludes what you say. It's fact that even when your husband was laying right next to you, you couldn't get his attention. I couldn't get mine 15 feet behind me in the dwelling to say, come out and look at this thing flashing its light back at me, because I was aiming a spotlight, like a deer hunter light. I was flickering it in the sky, and suddenly this big ball of light came over me and started to flash back. And I knew it was intelligent. It was remarkably intelligent, because every time I did it, it waited for me to finish. It was like it knew how many clicks I had to do it. And once I went through the clicks, because it had like 4 motions on it, then it would start to illuminate. And then it was like when I was done, it illuminated to me, and then it self-illuminated. It dimmed down, like they hit the dimmer switch. And I went through that 3 or 4 times, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I get myself into?
Right.
Because I wasn't trying for this.
No.
I wasn't trying for it. No, I never had any expectation. I was just sitting in front of a fire, beaming my light across into the pasture in the field, looking at, I don't remember at the time if it was horses or goats, because they had numerous animals. And it just happened like that. And I thought to myself, and I still think to this day, I would like to get regressed just to understand if there's a missing link, the why nobody else around me heard me, because they should have heard me. I got a pretty big mouth.
I think it goes back to, and we all have to start learning about quantum physics to understand this better. And that's when everyone turns off and goes, nope, I don't want to learn about quantum physics. But it's really just the idea that 2 things can exist in the same place at the same time, but we're in different planes. And I think what we're dealing with are entities who are multidimensional, extra dimensional. So there are different planes. And that's why if I'm in this plane over here, like I was during my near-death experience, no one's going to hear me if I'm speaking or yelling. And then we go to, so it makes a sense. And also when there's no time in that plane, but they can watch us and observe us, they can be watching backwards and forwards through time, which means a demon can show up and say, hi, I'm your grandma. Remember your favorite cookies I used to make, or the song we sang together, and have all this information. So you think you might be talking to a past relative when really you're talking to a demon that's been watching your whole life, who knows all these details and is going to trick you into inviting them in. and then be attached to you, and you're going to pay for that with your life or your blood or whatever they decide they want you to pay for with. So it gets back to the dangers again, because we don't have, they're at such an advantage, and we are at a disadvantage. But once you realize, oh wait, this, the breakthrough moment for me was, oh wait, they have the same creator I do. They have to answer to the same creator I do. We all have to follow the rules and regulations set forth by our creator. And you can call that creator whatever name you want. I call it God, Jesus, the pre-incarnate Christ before that, what have you. And when I realized that, and I looked at them and I'm like, you can't touch me. If I call him my creator and he tells you, you have to leave me alone, you have to leave me alone. They were pissed because they knew it was right and they had to leave me alone, which is why they sent those kids to try to get me to come back, because they knew I have a heart of a mother and I'll do anything for my children. But there was no love coming from these entities. They may have had some of my DNA and they may have had some biological connection, but they didn't have that heart, that love, that soul that I have children that are not my biological children, who I love with all of my heart and all of my soul. And I tell them, you were born in my heart, because love doesn't have to come from DNA. And that was, I think, their misstep with me, is that I understand what love was. I love unconditionally. I love my children unconditionally. So they tried that. And even my handler, I know we're going to run out of time soon, but even my handler came back and tried to lure me back in. My handler was the entity that I was with throughout my whole life. And I write about him extensively in the book. Not extensively, but I write quite a bit about him in the book. And tried to abduct me into an astral realm to get me to come back, saying he was dying and he wouldn't be able to live if I wasn't there to help. Again, pulling on that compassion that I have for all living things, right, and everything in God's kingdom. And, they tried everything they could to get me to come back into that program that I have been in my whole life. And I use the program in quotes loosely because it's a terrifying nightmare is what it is. But they would always say, you're part of the program. You're part of the program. You're special. No, I wasn't special. Aside from my DNA, I'm my O negative. I had the blood type they wanted. I had the lineage, the history that they wanted, the family lines, whatever. I had all these things that they wanted. And so they thought that gave them right to kidnap me as a little child, and that nobody has that right. I'm sorry. No. So, right. Yeah, they you're right. Exactly. 100% agree with you. And I just think, we have to be careful, because they do have abilities and capabilities that we don't, and that far outreach us. However, we have the one who created them and the one who created us, who can take them out of our orbit, who can take them away from us, who can save us from them. And we don't have to put up with these unwanted seizures anymore. We can get away from it just by calling on God, just by calling on our creator, just by understanding how that works.
Right. And it's a very simple process. But again, they tried using deception on you all the way to do whatever it would take for you to, I guess, for them to hold the grasp of the hand over you somehow, some way. But I probably put that in a bad way, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But knowing how to shut it off is what's more important. Yeah. Again, me, some people say, why didn't you see it all the way through? You ran like a little girl. We all hear that terminology, when it comes to paranormal and whatnot. But how far do you really want to take it? And you don't know until you can share a conversation with somebody like you, Karin Wilkinson, that can better describe why you may not want to, because you had to live it completely through your life. From like at the earliest, in some of your earliest memories, all this was happening. And as you said, you had all the right things. Looks, maybe the hair color, the blood type. And there must be an importance of why, because we look at this big 2030 agenda and we look at all the things we just lived through. And I'm not trying to bring up that big P word again in any way, but it's almost like they want to replace us with something else. And I wonder if this is the replacement program getting ready. But then we also have others saying you wouldn't know it if they walked amongst you, and they already are.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That was actually a report. There's a wonderful Facebook friend named Dana Louise who I somehow now I can't contact to give her credit, but she had a article about that on her Facebook page. So I shared it and then went and found the Harvard report that's a crypto-terrestrial hypothesis. And it's a case for scientific openness to a concealed earthly explanation for unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Basically, they're saying, yeah, we think they're here and they're under the ground. And it goes on and on. And it's interesting in that, as a society in a whole, we're becoming more comfortable and more familiar with who and what these things are. And the government and Congress are having, talks about it. Like you said, everything is starting to come bubbling to the surface, and it will be released on their time as far as our leaders go, the powers that be, unless these entities decide they want it out there now. In which case, I think that they are paving the way so that should something like that happen, they can say, well, we let you know. See, we did all of these things. They're kind
right.
of setting it up just carefully enough so they can say, well, we already gave you disclosure, even though it wasn't full disclosure.
Right. But I do believe that you're right. Not a full disclosure, but I
Mhm.
think we're on the cusp of disclosure. And we are at a point where I think it's benefiting us more than it's benefiting them. They're not ready. And I
Mm-mm.
do believe that there are interactions, like with even you, what I experienced, and I have other things that I could, but that's not time for this right now. But um, you know, uh, we can only stay focused, I think, the best way we can, um, and keep in the fight. And I think we have a
Mhm.
lot of really good heroes out there that are doing that, and
Oh, yeah.
trying to bring everything that matters of importance, because the need to know for us is not going to be as catastrophic as what they are leading us to want to believe, because we're not ready for it yet. That's the
Right, right,
basic truth of what they're telling us. That's
right,
always
right.
been the truth of what they're telling us. But we
Yeah.
know that it actually is happening. We know our military, some of our military men know it's happening. When you go into the below level 7 and you are assigned to that area, there are many areas within the areas that even the military are not permitted to go to. So we know, I mean, I know firsthand in talking to men like this and women that experience this, that by accident actually saw things that, like you saw on an invitation, as if that welcome mat outside your door said, welcome in,
Yeah.
anybody, you know. But no, they know that there was no holes barred in certain areas that they were never allowed to go through. Some people that actually worked under there through their whole entire enlistment program, and also would come across certain people, and they were never to interact with them.
Oh, yeah. We were told
We had
never to
people
interact, and
down
they
there
were not
running
allowed.
an underworld.
Right, right. We weren't allowed to interact. They weren't allowed to interact. They used us to show them and they used us being me and other abductees. I experienced it. I saw it done where they would use us and put us in scenarios and say, you don't want this to happen to your wives, your daughters, your children, your friends, you. And by the time the people realized what they were gotten into, they'd signed NDAs, they were too deep in, and they weren't going to say anything because I understand that they were protecting their families. I used to have a lot of anger towards the people that did not help me. I was just a little kid. But now I understand they're protecting their own kids. They had
Right,
to, and they were doing what they had to do. And if they had tried to talk, they wouldn't have been able to do anything. They realized this was so much bigger than they were. They didn't know what to do. They felt helpless, just the way I did.
right.
So, and something to a comment you said earlier, I wanted to bring up. You said people said, "Oh, you ran away like a little girl," when you said that, right? Or that you ran away when you saw. You
Yeah,
know, listen, when babies are born, we are pre-engineered to know what to be afraid of and when to run. Babies are born and they will show them pictures of rattlesnakes or lions and they will shock back in fear. We are born knowing certain things to be afraid of. When you naturally feel that fear, it's not like I'm afraid to go take this test or I'm afraid to go meet this new person. It's an innate inside natural fear, and you darn well better get your behind out of there. That's what you felt. And that's good that you ran, because your whole being was telling you you should not be here.
Right.
The same way a little infant knows that when it sees a picture of a rattlesnake or a lion with its teeth bared. We are pre-designed to understand what we're afraid of. So when something, fear is not of God, but he has designed in us an understanding of things that we need to stay away from.
Right.
There's a difference.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's significant. It's like a dog's instinct. You throw it into the water, it knows how to doggy paddle. For some mysterious reason,
Huh?
it just knows what to do. It's a self-protected kind of like you just said. It's in it. It's within us. It's instilled in us. So even us as people, we have logic, we have common sense, and even from the youngest ages, we know these things. And it makes me wonder about when we're kids and we have these weird, odd dreams, why they occur the way they do. But nevertheless, we learn from whatever has been given to us, this gift. And it is a gift as long as we accept it to try to understand it and learn from it. Because I think as much as something could be inside us, part of our whole being, we don't even always understand what we totally are or what our total capabilities could be or are, from what the things that we learn and we accept and we endure. So it's pretty fascinating that you brought it up because, instinctively animals know if you're going to swat a fly, it's going to fly away. Instinctively, it knows. Well, if someone's going to swat me in the mouth, I'm going to do the same thing. And that's
Right.
why I said everything on this earth is alive.
Mhm.
It's alive. Trees are alive.
Oh yeah.
Grass is alive. Bugs are alive. The bugs know before we do.
Oh yeah. Like we've got these storms blowing in. I'm in Texas and we get that big old tropical storm blowing in. And this morning I went outside just to check things out back, and the birds were all acting funny and they're all getting up in the trees and going nuts. And I'm like, oh, they must know what's coming. There's a storm coming. The animals know,
Yeah,
the
if you
instinct.
don't mind me asking, what part of Texas or something
Yeah,
close
we're
by
in
where
we're in the
you are?
Austin. We're outside of Austin. We're near Austin,
Awesome.
Texas. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're just a couple miles from a couple hours from the coast, but everything blows in, the
Sure.
coast to all of us here. So we're not Houston. They're gonna, we're Corpus Christi, but we still get the storms and everything. But
Sure. And all the heat.
and the heat, yes,
And
we get the
it
heat.
seems like Texas is just like a landmark of attack for whatever. I mean,
With
even here in
everything.
Pittsburgh. And I'm not saying this for the wrong reasons. It's like there's always a cloak of white over. I feel like I'm in the dome here, like asking special permission for just normalcy of weather and
Yeah,
so forth.
exactly.
They say now that the jet stream has changed, but the funny part about that is I know the wind direction. I pay attention to it because I'm looking into everything. I'm one of these 50-year-old old ducks that just do this. So I want the science to everything for me, my science to understand it. Nothing's changed. If I was to put a windmill up, the air is still going to hit from the same side, which means the storm's coming from the same direction as it did 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Exactly. It's just you gotta, yeah, we gotta keep figuring out what's going on for ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, because we can't trust the powers that be anymore. But not that we ever could. But
Right.
pray,
Right.
yeah, just be vigilant, pray, and make sure that you feel comfortable with how you believe and what you believe, because I think those days are our days are numbered. But well, I've had such a great time with you, Michael. I know that our time is wrapping up. So before we wrap up, did you have any more questions for me before I have to let you go?
Well, I want to just thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I know you've been doing a lot of that. It's fascinating. It's heartbreaking, and I want you to know I got a big hug for you. I'm so sad
Thank
of
you.
what you had to endure by yourself. But I do believe as long as we have truthers out there like yourself, we are going to gain much more uh, insight to what we are trying to all figure out together is one. I hope that we can unify, and I know that you're unifying many people. So I thank you for your work, you helping other women out there, and in some cases, some of the men who probably have some of the same type of
Oh, yeah.
scenarios. Women are only talking about it, which is one-sided, because
Oh,
I think honestly, if it's happening to one gender, it's happening to another.
oh, it is. I've talked to men who've been through similar circumstance, who've had their sperm taken from them against their will. So it's not just women, it's men, it's children, it's cattle that are being mutilated. It's just, it's everything. It's a lot, and it's a lot for a lot of people. And I just want to make it okay to have these conversations for people to say, hey, I was abducted by non-human alien entities. No, I'm not crazy. I'm your neighbor. I'm your friend. I'm your sister, whatever. It's okay. I want to make it okay. I want it to be okay for people to say, this happened to me. It really messed with me, and I want to deal with it. Instead
Right.
of having this public stigma of, oh, no, we don't talk about these things. I'm
Oh yeah, the
done with
stigma.
that. Yeah.
The big bad S word. Yeah.
Yeah. I
I
want to
mean,
be
we
done
need
with
to just
that.
remove that from Webster. Let's just take it out of
Exactly.
there and get rid of it. But no, I do thank you for coming on.
No,
You've
well, thank
been
you.
such a heartwarming person.
Thank
And
you.
I hope maybe in the future we can do this again at some point.
Oh, for
I
sure. Yeah,
do believe if the buzz is right, you're working on a book 2 to come out also.
I am. It's just in beginning stages, so I don't know when, but I am working on it. Yes. So I'm excited for
Okay.
that.
Is
Excited for
there
the next one.
and also is there anything upcoming where you're going to be
Yeah.
that you'd like to share
Yeah.
out to anybody, or do you want to share your website or allow
Yeah.
me to do it? Because I do
Yeah.
see you have it up here.
Yeah, I have it up there. My website's KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com. And you can reach out to me through the website. There's a contact page. If you want to reach out to me, that is the way that I recommend you do it. Social media is very hard for me to respond to because I get so many messages in there, unless it's someone like Michael, where I've already got him flagged as a friend and I can put you in a special folder.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to see your message for a while unless I'm digging through all of the spam. So reach out to me through my website, KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com. You can find the book exclusively at lamarzulli.com. That's LAMARZULLI.com. There are links to that on my website, links to that in my social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. I will be at the Prophecy Watchers Conference in Colorado Springs, Colorado next week, June 27th. Beyond that, I'm not sure which conferences I'll be out through the end of the year. I've got some surgery coming up. So we're going to kind of play the rest of the year by ear. And I'll have a better schedule up for next year once we get through this year. But the good thing about that is I'll have more time to write, which I'm very excited about. And because there's so much more we need to share, for sure.
And you have a lot of great influence around you, so I'm sure it's going to be remarkable.
I hope so. Well, thank you.
I'll be posting, just so everybody knows, a copy of her book on how you can get it. Please like and share to all your friends and all your peeps out there that understand when two people get together like we have today, it's for the better of all mankind. Not just one, not anybody in particular, but for everybody who is awake and open for it. I think we're building a big crowd out here. I really do. Your work is,
I hope so.
I take my, I praise to, all your efforts and everything.
All glory to God. I'll tell you, I couldn't do any of this without God. It's all glory to God. But thank you, Michael, for the great work you're doing too. You're giving people a place to have a voice.
I'm trying to make those steps happen. I think my path will open as long as I'm real to people, and that's all I want to be. You're getting old. I just want to live life like you. I want to be happy. I want to, enjoy conversations. Like there's nothing wrong with these conversations. They're enlightening. They're helpful. But again, I know you got to run. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you, Karin Wilkinson. I totally do. And again, anytime you want to come back on, or if you want to do one, please, let me know what you're thinking, and I'll zip us up something in the title, and we'll go wild and give everybody some information.
We'll get it scheduled so that we don't let too much grass grow under our feet before I come back. Thank you, Michael. I just adore you. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you to everyone who was in the chat today and watching live. We appreciate you guys so much. Y'all have a blessed day.
Okay. Take care, sweetheart. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Wow, that was pretty remarkable. First, I want to thank everybody who was able to watch. I'm when you get a lot of people watching, sometimes they don't, or you're sharing, they shut you down a little bit. But we'll do okay. We'll bounce back. We'll get a lot of people to look at the segment that I just did with Karen. Remember, her book is Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. It's a remarkable story of a young lady who, I would suggest you read the book. And I got some great guests coming up also. I'll be posting them. I get to do a promo for Disclosure Now that's coming up with Brian. So that's being planned. I got Mark Oley coming back on for the final Templar voyage to catch back up and do our third and final segment on that, just to give you guys a heads up. And I do appreciate everybody that was able to watch. If anything comes to mind and you have a question, if you're seeing this now, today, later, tomorrow, and there's something in there, I can always remove what you're asking and save that question, or, if you're looking for some type of response into a later segment, and then I can bring it up to Karen's attention. But thank you so much for joining in today. I greatly appreciate you all. I am Michael Anthony. This was What's in Disguise on America Disclosing Uncensored. Thank you all. Like and share.